KIMT News anchor Jodi Huisentruit was just 27 at the time of her disappearance.
At 4:10 in the morning on June 27th, 1995, a phone rang in an apartment in Mason City, Iowa. A producer at KIMT Television was calling because the anchor of the morning show had not arrived for work. The anchor answered. She said she had overslept. She said she was on her way. She was not on her way.
Police did find suspicious evidence near Jodi's car.
There were, in fact, a pair of shoes, some keys, a hairdryer, and some other items that were found.
When police arrived at her apartment complex 3 hours later, they found her car in the parking lot. The driver's side door was open. Her belongings were scattered across the concrete. A pair of red high heels, a blow dryer, a bottle of hairspray, earrings, and a car key that had been bent, as though someone had gripped it with force and twisted. An unidentified partial palm print was recovered from a pole near the car. An unidentified hair was recovered from the scene.
We have 2 standing file cabinets full of witness statements, tips and reports, newspaper articles, videotapes.
At least 3 neighbors reported hearing screams around the time she would have been leaving for work. One neighbor reported seeing a white Ford Econoline van idling in the parking lot. Jodi Huisentruit was 27 years old. She was a television news anchor.
Welcome back to Daybreak. It is Monday morning, November 7th, one day after my mom's birthday. I'm Jodi Huisentruit.
Well, happy birthday, Jodi's mom.
Happy birthday, Jane. I call her Teddy Bear.
Well, birthday.
Happy birthday, Teddy Bear.
She answered the phone that morning and said she was on her way, and then she was gone. So completely and so silently that in 30 years, not a single trace of her has ever been found.
Jodi Huisentruit. This is an interesting case.
This is the case of Jodi Huisentruit, and this is the open file. Jodi Sue Huisentruit was born on June 5, 1968, in Long Prairie, Minnesota, a small town in the center of the state, where the land is flat and the winters are long, and the distances between places are measured in silence. She was the youngest daughter of Maurice and Jane Huisentruit. She grew up in Long Prairie, and in the way of small-town children who are gifted at something, she became known early for what she could do. She was a golfer, a good one. She won the state Class A tournament with her team in 1985, and again in 1986. She was the kind of athlete who made it look easy, which is the kind of athlete people remember. After high school, she enrolled at St. Cloud State University. She studied mass communications and speech communication. She graduated in 1990 with a bachelor's degree and a plan. She was going to be on television. Her first job after college was not in broadcasting. It was as a flight attendant for Northwest Airlines. It was work that required composure, reliability, and the ability to present a calm face to strangers, qualities that would serve her well in the path she was about to take. She landed her first broadcasting job at KGAN, a CBS affiliate in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, as the station's Iowa City bureau chief. She returned to Minnesota for a position at KSAX, an ABC affiliate in Alexandria, and then she returned to Iowa to KIMT, a small CBS affiliate in Mason City, near the Minnesota border, where she became the anchor of the morning show, Daybreak. Mason City was not a large market. KIMT was not a large station, but morning television is its own kind of endurance. Early hours, tight deadlines, the discipline of being bright and prepared when the rest of the world is still waking up. Jodi Huisentruit was good at it. She was, by the accounts of her colleagues, professional and well-liked.
Channel
3 team. News, weather, and sports. This is News Channel 3's Daybreak.
Good Monday morning. Welcome to Daybreak. It's June 26th. I'm Jodi Huisentruit.
And I'm Kevin Scruba. Good morning, everybody. And
Coming up, a wild weather weekend.
yes, a lot of rain and much needed for the farms, from what I've heard.
She was building a career in the way that careers in local television are built. One small market at a time. One early morning at a time. She was 27. She was single. She had friends. She had a life that was still taking shape. And on the morning of June 27th, 1995, her producer called to wake her up, and she answered the phone, and she said she was on her way. The day before she disappeared was a Monday. Jodi participated in a golf tournament that day. It was the kind of thing she had been doing since high school. Competitive, social, an extension of the person she had always been. After the tournament, she went to the home of John Vansice. Vansice was a salesman in Mason City. He was approximately 20 years older than Jodi. He was not her boyfriend. He was, by his own account, and by the accounts of others, a friend, an older man who had taken an interest in her. Vansice told investigators that Jodi came to his house that evening to watch a homemade videotape of a birthday celebration he had arranged for her earlier that month. He had organized a party. He had filmed it. She came over to see it. Weeks earlier, Vansice had taken Jodi water skiing on Clear Lake with friends. He kept a boat there. He had named the boat after her. These details, the birthday party, the videotape, the boat, the name, would become significant later, not because they proved anything, but because they described a relationship that was, at minimum, unusual. A 50-something salesman and a 27-year-old television anchor, alone in his home on the night before she vanished, watching a video he had made of her birthday. Jodi wrote about the water skiing weekend in her journal. She described the fun she had. She did not describe anything that would explain what happened the next morning. No one knows what time she left Vansice's house. No one knows what she did between leaving and going to sleep. There is a gap in the evening. Not a suspicious gap, not a documented gap, just the ordinary space between the end of one day and the beginning of the next. And then the phone rang at 4:10 in the morning, and she answered it, and she said she was on her way, and the gap became the last thing anyone knows about Jodi Huisentruit. Amy Kunz was the producer of Daybreak. When 4 a.m. came and went without Jodi at the station, Kunz called her apartment. Jodi answered. She told Kunz she had overslept and was on her way. It was the kind of thing that happens in morning television. Alarms fail, mornings get away from you. Kunz hung up and waited. By 6 a.m., Jodi had still not arrived. Kunz went on the air herself and anchored the morning show alone. She did not explain Jodi's absence on the broadcast. At 7:13 a.m., KIMT staff called the Mason City Police Department. When officers arrived at Jodi's apartment complex, they found her red Mazda Miata in the parking lot. She was in the process of buying the car. It was not yet fully hers, but she was driving it. The driver's side door was open, and on the concrete around the car was the evidence of a life interrupted mid-step. Red high heels, the kind a woman wears to work on television, a blow dryer, a bottle of hairspray, earrings, a car key, bent at an angle that suggested it had been gripped and wrenched with force. These were the things a woman carries when she is preparing to go on camera. They were dropped, they were scattered, they were not placed. They were the debris of someone who was taken between her front door and her car door, a distance of perhaps 20 feet. At least 3 neighbors reported hearing screams around the time Jodi would have been leaving for work, between 4:15 and 4:30 a.m. One neighbor reported seeing a white Ford Econoline van idling in the parking lot. The van was never identified. Its owner was never found. An unidentified partial palm print was recovered from a pole near the car. An unidentified hair was recovered from the scene. Neither has ever been matched to a suspect. There was no blood. There was no weapon recovered. There was no ransom note, no phone call, no demand. There was only a parking lot with a woman's belongings scattered across it, and a silence so total that in 30 years it has not been broken by a single confirmed sighting. In the years since Jodi's disappearance, investigators have looked at a number of persons of interest. None have been elevated to the status of suspect. None have been charged. And yet the names have accumulated, the way names accumulate in cases that refuse to close. Each one a possibility, none of them an answer. John Vansice was the last person known to have seen Jodi alive. He was the man who took her water skiing. He named his boat after her. He threw her a birthday party and filmed it. She was at his house the evening before she disappeared, watching that video. In March 2017, a search warrant was executed against Vansice, seeking GPS data from 2 of his vehicles. An officer later explained that the warrant was an investigative technique. He had invited Vansice in for an interview and hoped GPS trackers, if placed on the vehicles, might show a spooked Vansice driving to a burial site. No such evidence resulted. Vansice was never charged. He died in December 2024. He never became a suspect. Tony Jackson was a serial rapist. He was 21 at the time of Jodi's disappearance. He was living 2 blocks from the KIMT broadcast studios and approximately 1 mile from Jodi's apartment. He was later convicted of multiple rapes and sentenced to life in prison. Investigators interviewed him about Jodi's case. He denied any involvement. There was no physical evidence connecting him to the abduction. But a serial rapist living 2 blocks from a television station, where a woman was abducted on her way to work at 4 a.m., is a proximity that demands attention, even when it yields nothing. Christopher Rivak was a man from Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. In October 2025, DNA evidence linked him to the 2006 murder of a woman in Wisconsin and the 2007 murder of a woman in Missouri. His girlfriend had lived in Mason City at the time of Jodi's disappearance. Rivak died by suicide in his jail cell in July 2009, 1 day after being charged with second-degree murder. Mason City police have clarified that there is no direct evidence linking Rivak to Jodi's case, but a suspected serial killer whose girlfriend lived in Mason City in June 1995 is another proximity that haunts this investigation. Brad Miliband was the ex-husband of Jodi's childhood best friend, Patty Niemeyer. He lived in Winstead, Minnesota. In October 2024, Mason City police searched a wooded site in rural Winstead that was scheduled for development after what was reported to be an anonymous tip. The site was adjacent to a house Miliband had previously owned. In November 2025, police returned to Winstead after a house that was an area of interest and had not been accessible during the earlier search was demolished. No human remains were found. Miliband has never been charged. 4 men, 4 proximities, 4 reasons to look, and not one piece of evidence that places any of them in that parking lot at 4:15 in the morning on June 27, 1995. In October 2024, Private investigator Steve Ridge, who had been working the case since 2019, revealed something that had not been publicly known for nearly 30 years. Jodi had a new boyfriend. She had begun dating someone approximately 10 days before her disappearance. They had been in contact daily or nearly daily since they met. Investigators had spoken to this man and cleared him early in the investigation. He was not a suspect, but Ridge believed the relationship was significant, not because the boyfriend was involved, but because of what the relationship may have provoked in someone else. A new boyfriend, 10 days in, daily contact. If someone else was watching Jodi, someone who believed he had a claim on her attention, someone who had named his boat after her, someone who threw her a birthday party and filmed it, then a new man in her life was not an irrelevant detail. Ridge called Jodi's disappearance a crime of jealousy. He offered a $25,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of Jodi's remains, even if an arrest was never made. In September 2023, he increased it to $50,000. In December 2025, he doubled it to $100,000. Effective through June 27, 2026, 31 years to the day after she vanished. $100,000 for a body, not for a conviction, not for a name, for remains, for the physical proof that a woman who was last seen at 4:10 in the morning actually existed after that morning in a form that could be found. That is where this case sits, not at the edge of resolution, at the edge of something more basic, the question of whether Jodi Huisentruit's body still exists anywhere that a person could reach it. The Mason City Police Department has investigated Jodi Huisentruit's disappearance for 30 years. In that time, they have conducted more than 1,000 interviews. Not one has resulted in conclusive evidence pointing to a suspect. In September 1995, the Huisentruit family hired private investigators from Minneapolis, McCarthy and Associates, who enlisted Omaha-based investigator Doug Jarser. They appeared on America's Most Wanted and Unsolved Mysteries. In November 1995, they traveled to Los Angeles to meet with 3 prominent psychics. The meeting was televised and became the pilot for the Psychic Detectives television show. None of it produced a lead. In May 1996, approximately 100 volunteers searched an area of Cerro Gordo County. They flagged anything that appeared suspicious. Law enforcement re-examined each site. Nothing was found. In 2008, something strange happened. Photocopies of Jodi's personal journal, 84 pages, were anonymously mailed to the Mason City Globe-Gazette in a large envelope with no return address and a June 4th postmark from Waterloo, Iowa. The original journal had been in police custody since the investigation began. Within days, the Mason City Police Department identified the sender, Cheryl Ellingson, the wife of former Mason City Police Chief David Ellingson. Ellingson had taken a copy of the journal home with him when he left office 2 years earlier. His wife mailed it to the newspaper. The police gave no motive for why a former chief had removed a copy of evidence from the case. They gave no motive for why his wife interfered in the investigation by sending it to the press. The department characterized it as inadvertent. Not everyone believed them. In 2016, retiring Iowa State Representative John Kuiker, a member of the Iowa State House Public Safety Committee, wrote an opinion piece suggesting a cover-up by Mason City officials. He did not specify what was being covered up or by whom, but a state legislator writing on the record in a newspaper that a city was covering up the disappearance of a television anchor. That is not a routine event. The journal, the former chief, the wife, the photocopies, the newspaper, the state representative. These are not evidence of a crime, but they are evidence of something. A case that was handled in ways that raised questions by people who did not always answer them. There are cases where the absence of evidence is itself the evidence, where the thing that was not found, the body, the weapon, the witness, becomes the central fact because it was removed so completely that 30 years of searching cannot locate it. Jodi Huisentruit was taken from a parking lot between her apartment door and her car door. This is a distance that can be measured in seconds, perhaps 15, perhaps 20. A woman walks out of her building with a blow dryer and hairspray and high heels, and she is intercepted before she reaches her vehicle, and she screams, and the next thing that exists is the scattering of her belongings on concrete and a silence that has lasted 3 decades. This was not a crime of opportunity in the conventional sense. A stranger walking past a parking lot at 4:15 in the morning in a small Iowa city does not typically intercept a specific person between her door and her car. This was either a targeted abduction, someone who knew when Jodi left for work, who knew where she parked, who was waiting, or it was an astronomically unlikely random act. The white van complicates both theories. If it was targeted, the van suggests premeditation and a vehicle large enough to transport a person quickly. If it was random, the van suggests someone who was already in that parking lot at that hour for another purpose and seized an opportunity that presented itself. But a woman does not vanish from a parking lot in a small city without someone noticing something. And 3 people did notice something. They heard screams, and one person saw something. A white van. And then the morning went on, and the producer anchored the show alone. And the phone call at 4:10 was the last time anyone heard Jodi Huisentruit's voice. The silence that followed that phone call has not been broken. Not by a body, not by a confession, not by a match on the palm print or the hair, not by a witness who saw more than a van, not by 30 years of investigation, 1,000 interviews, $100,000 in reward money, and the combined efforts of local police, state investigators, federal agents, private investigators, psychics, and 2 television programs dedicated to finding her. A woman said she was on her way, and then she was not. And the distance between those 2 statements is a parking lot, and a pair of red shoes and a bent key, and a silence that is now 30 years long. In 2018, 48 Hours aired an episode on Jodi's disappearance. It featured John Vansice in what were described as never-before-seen footage segments. The reason for the attention on Vansice was never fully explained by authorities. The fact that he had been looked at was not revealed until it was leaked that same year. In July 2025, Hulu released a 3-part documentary series titled Her Last Broadcast: The Abduction of Jodi Huisentruit. The series dispelled many rumors and erroneous media reports that had accumulated over the years. It focused attention on 4 persons of interest: Tony Jackson, Brad Miliband, Christopher Rivak, and John Vansice. It included an admission from the officer who requested the 2017 GPS warrant on Vansice. The trackers were an investigative technique meant to see if a spook suspect might lead them to a burial site. They did not. The series also revealed that 2 witnesses had told Mason City Police about a suspicious man seen lurking near Jodi's apartment complex before her disappearance. A detail that had not been publicly known. None of the 4 persons of interest have ever been elevated to the status of suspects. The Mason City Police Department has found no evidence against any of them. 30 years of police work. 4 names, no charges. The Find Jodi website, created in 2003 by Minnesota television journalist Josh Benson and Gary Peterson, continues to operate as a clearinghouse for tips. The Find Jodi podcast, launched in 2020, keeps the case in front of new audiences. Steve Ridge continues to investigate and increase the reward. The case is not cold. That is the official position. The Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation is still actively investigating. Mason City Police are still searching properties in Minnesota. $100,000 waits for a body. But the distance between not cold and solved is the distance between a parking lot in Mason City and wherever Jodi Huisentruit is. And that distance has not been closed in 30 years. Jodi's parents, Morris and Jane Huisentruit, are from Long Prairie, Minnesota. They are the kind of parents who, in the language of small towns, did everything right. Raised a daughter who was talented and driven and kind, watched her leave for a career she wanted, and received a phone call on a Tuesday morning that she had not shown up for work. In May 2001, Jodi was declared legally dead. She was 32 by then, or she would have been if she had been alive. No body had been found. No suspect had been identified. The declaration was a legal formality that allowed the family to settle her estate. It was not closure. It was paperwork. Maurice and Jane have not spoken publicly in recent years. Their age and the weight of 30 years have made them quieter. But the family has never stopped cooperating with investigators. They have never stopped hoping that someone, somewhere, knows something. In 2015, all 100 members of the Iowa House of Representatives signed a letter requesting that Mason City declare June 27, 2015, as Jodi Huisentruit Day. In honor of her memory and that of all victims in unsolved cases, the city declined. 100 legislators asked the city to honor a missing woman. The city said no. There is a single piece of physical evidence in this case that has never been explained. It is not the hair, which may or may not have come from the scene. It is not the white van, which may or may not have been involved. It is the palm print. An unidentified partial palm print was recovered from a pole near Jodi's car in the parking lot of her apartment complex on the morning of June 27, 1995. It has been run through databases. It has been compared to persons of interest. It has been compared to the men who were investigated: Vansice, Jackson, Ravak, Miliband. It has never been matched. Someone touched that pole. That someone was close enough to Jodi's car to leave a print on the pole beside it. That someone has never been identified. A partial palm print is a small thing. It is not a name. It is not a face. It is not a confession. But it is physical. It is real. It is a record of a person's presence in a specific place at a specific time. And that person has not been found. In a case with almost no physical evidence, the palm print is the anchor. It says, someone was here. Someone who has never come forward. Someone whose hand was on that pole, near that car, on the morning a woman disappeared. The print has been in evidence for 30 years. The person who left it has not. At 4:10 in the morning on June 27, 1995, Jodi Huisentruit answered a phone call from her producer. She said she had overslept. She said she was on her way. She was not on her way. Something was already in the parking lot, or someone was already waiting, and the distance between her front door and her car door became the distance between the life she was living and the absence that replaced it. Her red shoes were found on the concrete. Her hairdryer, her hairspray, her earrings, her car key bent a palm print on a pole that has never been matched, a hair that has never been identified, screams heard by 3 neighbors, a white van seen by 1, a phone call in which a woman said she was leaving and then did not leave and was never seen again. John Vansice is dead. Tony Jackson is in prison. Christopher Rivak is dead. Brad Miliband has never been charged. The police chief's wife mailed a journal to a newspaper, and no one explained why. A state legislator suggested a cover-up, and no one investigated it. $100,000 is waiting for a body that has not been found. Sometimes, in cases like this, the silence is not the silence of absence. It is the silence of something that was not done. An investigation that was not thorough enough. A lead that was not followed. A question that was not asked when asking it might have mattered. Jodi Huisentruit said she was on her way. She was 27. She was a morning news anchor in a small Iowa city. She had a new boyfriend. She had a career. She had a life that was just beginning to take the shape she wanted. And her disappearance is still one of Mason City's greatest mysteries.